Introduction to the multiplier, which is in one of the modules. Economics has 4 modules, just a reminder. Economics has 4 modules. One of them is the macroeconomics, which is normally done in the first term. So this is part of term 1 work. What is the multiplier, or what can one say to describe or to introduce the multiplier? Now, the multiplier is also known as the ripple or snowball effect. Now, the reason why we say that it's a snowball effect, or yes, it's a snowball effect, it is because if you can just picture or try and imagine a snow rolling from up the hill, what it does as it's going down, it is picking up more snow, and the ball would now be growing and growing and growing as that snowball is flowing down, is rolling down the hill. Now, another thing that we need to know about the multiplier, it is that it is derived from the marginal propensity to consume. Now, the marginal propensity to consume, it might be a new term or a new concept for my grade 11 learners. However, do not worry, we are going to deal with all the concepts that you need to know. However, just to give a sort of like a general understanding of the term marginal propensity to consume, it would be the likelihood of someone consuming. Let's say you have 100 rand. From that 100 rand, there are 2 things that I can do from it. It's either I'm going to consume the whole 100 rand, or I'm going to consume some of the 100 rand, maybe consume 60%. That 60% is the likelihood of me using that 60%, and some of it I would be saving it. Now, the saved part, or the savings part, it is referred to as the marginal propensity to save. Then there are 2 elements, as I've already mentioned, that from that 100 rand, there are 2 things that I'm likely to do with that 100 rand. It is either I consume it or save some, or just save all of it, or just consume all of it. So those are the 2 important elements that you need to know when we are dealing with the multiplier. Now, the more spending that one person does, that spending then results in an income by another person. Again, I'll go back to my 100 rand example. Now, we said that the 60% is being used up. So that 60%, which is 60 rands from that 100 rand, that 60 rands is going to be an income to someone else from whom I've bought goods and services from. So that's why it says there, the more spending by one person, that results into an income to the other person. Now, the multiplier, it shows how an increase in spending. Now, in economics, we normally refer to spending into our circular flow as an injection, because that would mean that money that I am spending as a household or as an individual, it is changing hands within the circular flow or within the borders of one country. Now, it is referred to as an injection that produces a more than proportional income in the national income now as a whole. As I've mentioned, that I might be spending my 100 rand or 60 rands from that 100 rand. Now, that 60 rands that I have spent, someone else will go and spend it as they would be buying from the next person. Now, if you calculate in total, my 60 rands plus that second person's 60 rands, now it is now resulting in 120. So the more we spend, the more it results, or the more money that is injected into the circular flow, the more national income it produces. Now, the multiplier effect, it indicates the overall change now in the income due to the expenditure which that one person might have done, which is also known now as an investment, because now the money is within our circular flow that actually took place. It is calculated So how is the multiplier calculated? It is calculated by multiplying now the value of the multiplier. Don't worry, I'll show you how to go about calculating the multiplier. So you take the value, the answer that you get when you've done your calculation of the multiplier, and then you multiply it by the total injection that would have occurred within the circular flow. So now let's say that the injection of money into the circular flow is that 60 rands. Then the value of the multiplier, maybe it is 2. Now you would say the multiplier value, which is 2, multiply that by the total injection, that could be 60 rands. Then 60 times 2 would be 120. So that's why it is said to show now the overall changes that have actually happened in the national income. That is what the multiplier is all about. Now, the initial spending becomes someone else's income. As I've mentioned, that when I am spending that 60 rands from that 100 rand, that 60 rands, to me, it is a spending, but to someone else whom I'm going to be buying from, that 60 rands now becomes their income. Now, if they are going to spend that whole 60 rands or save some of that 60 rand, that is what normally happens when you have an income. It is either you save some of that money and spend some of it. As I've already mentioned, that there are two important elements that you need to be aware of when we are dealing with the multiplier. So those two important elements are your spending part and your saving part. So that is what normally happens when one receives an income. Now it says that the portion that is spent is that portion that is going to become that someone else's income. So from that 100 rands, that 60 rand that I spent, to me, that 60 rands is an expense or is an expenditure. I am consuming it. And then to someone else, that 60 rands is their income. So this someone, the second person now, might also decide to spend all of that 60 rands or save some of that 60 rand. Now, as the cycle continues on and on, that is known to be the multiplier effect, because initially I'm the one who spent the 60 rands. The second person now spent maybe 40% or spent 40 rands from that 60 rands, and then they decided that they were going to keep or save the 20 rands part. Now my initial 60 rands and that 40 rands is the multiplier effect that would be going on and on. And even the third person, they might also decide to maybe spend that 40% that they received from the second person. So that is the multiplier effect, grade 11s. Now for an example, if you have, now an example that I've made there is that if you have picked up maybe 100 rand, it's your lucky day. You happen to pick up 100 rand maybe on your way to school, and then you decide that from that 100 rands, you are going to spend only 75% or 75 rands of that 100 rand, and then you decide to maybe save 25 rands for the next day, or for maybe future purposes. Now, this means that your marginal propensity to consume, remember marginal propensity, the likelihood to consume, your marginal propensity to consume would be 0.5, which is 75% of the 100 rand is that part that you are going to spend. And then the 25 now that you are saving, it is your marginal propensity to save, which is also known as MPS. And the marginal propensity is referred to sometimes as or abbreviated as MPC. So whenever you see MPC, small letter, MPC, just know that that is your marginal propensity to consume, and your MPS, it is your marginal propensity to save. Now, when we add the MPC and the MPS, they need to give us 1. So always remember that your MPC and your MPS together, they give us 1. Remember, you had 100 rands. Now that's 75 rands that you spent plus the 25 rand. They are going to be equal to your 100 rand. There are only 2 things you can do with the new income. It is either you are going to spend it or you are going to save it. Now let's note, the marginal is referred to or also known as the additional part in economics. And I've said that the propensity part, it is the likelihood of someone doing something. So the likelihood of me spending, that's the marginal propensity to spend, because I'm spending that additional money that I now have. And then the MPS, it is the likelihood of me saving part of that income that I had acquired. Now in economics, grade 11s and also grade 12s, it is very important to remember our terms or our concepts. So remember right now, we have a new concept, grade 11s. We have the multiplier. What is the multiplier? We need to know that, so that when a question from an exam or an assessment pops up saying, describe what the multiplier is, you are in a position to do so. And also, and 2 more, you have marginal propensity to save. You need to remember that. And also marginal propensity to consume, which is the likelihood, which is the 2 important things that we need to pay attention to when we are dealing with the multiplier effect. So as I've already mentioned, that your terms and your concepts, they help you to make sure that you ace your section A, which is your MCQs, your match column A and B, and your 1.3, which is stating one term. Also, even in section B, there are parts that require us to actually know. In fact, the whole of section B requires us to know our terms or our concepts, because when they are asking you a question, normally that would be a term that they're asking you about. Now, if you don't understand what that term means, you might not be in a greater position to actually be able to answer that question. And even in section C, when you're doing your essays, the introduction, we all know that for economics, we no longer say, I will be discussing the multiplier, but you need to actually give a description when you are writing out your introduction. So those introduction, which is the description, those are the description of terms. So that is why it is very important. We always emphasize that learners, they need to become best buddies with their economic terms. So now we will then move on to actually doing the terminology that we are going to encounter when we are dealing with the multiplier. Now, I might have touched on injections when I was describing the multiplier. Now, injections as the first concept or as the first terminology, injections, they are known as the cash that is injected into the economy. So as I've mentioned, that if I decide to spend my 60 rands within the borders of our country, which is South Africa, then that would mean I am injecting money into the circular flow, because that 60 rands, it is going to change hands. Then leakages. What are leakages? Leakages, it is when money is being withdrawn now from the economy. So in another, you can look at injections as the opposite of injections, because when we are injecting, we are depositing money into the economy or circular flow. However, leakages now, It is the withdrawal. So a withdrawal of money can be either I am deciding to save. Remember that 100 rands I picked up? I took 60 rands and I saved 40 rands. So the 60 rands that I spent is money being injected, or cash being injected into the economy. And then the leakages part is me saving the 40 rands. Now, we have three leakages that we know of. We have savings, as I've already mentioned, that I can decide to save my money and not spend all of it. The second one, it would be when we are buying goods and services from outside our economy now. Maybe we are importing. Yes, in fact, when we are importing now from another country, money is going to leave our circular flow and go and be injected into that country's circular flow. In another form of leakages, it is when your money is being taxed. Taxation forms part of leakages. Look at it in this way. Your taxes, you are not going to be able to spend that part of money that was taxed by the government. So now taxes to me as an individual or as in a household, they are a leakage to me, because that part of the money, it is money that I am not able to spend. However, now the same taxes, when government is now using them, now they become an injection, because that would mean government is spending money within the borders of South Africa. Now money, it is being injected. And another injection would be, obviously I mentioned the consumption part, when we are consuming it, or yes, when we are spending it, that is your injection. And another injection into the circular flow or into the economy would be when we've sold goods to other countries. Now, as money is getting into or being injected into our economy or into our circular flow, now that would be an injection. And obviously, I mentioned that the other injection, it is the government spending. When the government is spending, that is also an injection. Then we're moving on to the equilibrium. Equilibrium, it exists when the aggregate demand is exactly equal to the aggregate supply. Hopefully we remember what aggregate demand is and what aggregate supply is. Aggregate, we refer to that as the total. Now that means when the total demand is exactly equal to the total supply. Now when we are doing the multiplier, we are dealing with a two-sector model. A two-sector model is a model or an economy that consists of only two participants. Also remember grade 11s and grade 12s that this work, it forms part of the circular flow. Now we have four participants of this circular flow. We have households, we have government, we have businesses, and if our circular flow is open, we have the foreign sector. Now, a two-sector model, it will be only consisting of businesses and households. So whenever we say a two-sector model, just know that we're talking about either households and businesses. If we're talking about a three-sector model now, you would need to add government. Then a four-sector model, which is also known as an open economy, it is inclusive of all four participants. Now, this one is a two-sector, and therefore it consists of only household and businesses. Marginal propensity to consume refers to the portion of the disposable income that the household is spending instead of actually saving. Remember that 60 rands that I decide to spend, that is the marginal propensity to consume. Then the marginal propensity to save is that 40 rands now. And it says that it refers to the portion of the disposable income that the household is saving instead of spending. we need to always make sure that we don't get confused by those two. The Keynesian line is also known as the line of equilibrium, or also known as the 45-degree line, or we refer to it as E is equal to Y. Now E denotes, or E standing for expenditure, Y standing for income. Here are some of the concepts that are taught with the circular flow. As I've mentioned, that this part, it forms this part of the work, it forms part of the circular flow. Injections, as we've already mentioned some of the injections. Injections, it is when money is flowing into the economy. Now, the formula for injections, we normally say in economics, J is equal to I standing for investment by businesses. G standing for government spending, when the government is spending within the circular flow. Then X for exports, which is the export money that we are going to receive for selling goods, our domestic goods in other countries. Then your leakages, whereby money is leaving the economy. We denote that as an L standing for leakages, is equal to savings, the money that I'm not going to spend, the money that I'm going to save. Also, that part or that portion of my income that goes to the government in a form of taxation. And also, when I decide now that I want to buy from another country, because that would be money leaving the South African circular flow, being injected into a foreign country's circular flow. And also equilibrium, where your injections, they are exactly equal to your leakages. So the money that is flowing in to the circular flow or into the economy, it is exactly equal to the money that would be leaving the circular flow or the economy. Now, back in grade 10, we were taught now that formula that says income, it is equal to the consumption by households. Also, the investment that is going to be done, or that is normally done by the businesses within the country, and also the money that government would be spending on public goods and services, plus our net exports. Now, net exports would be your export, the money that we received for selling goods in other countries, minus the money that we used when we were actually buying from other countries. Now, what we should all know is that an increase in a private consumer, it leads to an increase in the economic activity. So if I, as a consumer, as a household, I decide I'm going to take my money and I'm going to go and spend it, that money in the economy, it is going to increase the economic activities, because someone else will be using that money that I spent to maybe pay their employees, or even to buy more goods and services for their store. Also, the government's main expenditure is on the salaries now of the civil servants and on goods and services, which is the public goods and services. Now, for someone who might be asking themselves, now, what is a civil servant? Now, a civil servant, it is your government employees, all the people that are working for the government. So the government now needs to pay salaries to those people. And also the government needs to provide public goods and services. So when the government is now spending that money, spending into our circular flow, now that money is an injection into the circular flow, and that would also be contributing to the economic activities that would be happening. Now, our famous term GDP, which also means gross domestic product, which we were taught back in grade 10. So for both grade 11s and grade 12s, this description is revision to you. I'm sure you are reciting it now in your minds. So GDP, gross domestic product, is the market value of all final goods and services that are produced within the national borders within a certain period of time, which is normally within a year. So those are the things that you need to know when you are dealing with the multiplier. Grade 11s and also grade 12s, if you remember in term 1 when we were doing the circular flow, there were 3 methods that we used to calculate the GDP. Hopefully you still remember those. You have your income method, you have your expenditure method, and the third one is, so you have your income method, you have your expenditure method. So it's a pie. So it's production method. Yes, I'm also forgetting now. So the pie, remember, it also helped me now to remember what are the 3 methods to actually calculate a GDP. So pie, P standing for production, I standing for income, and E standing for expenditure. Earlier on, I think it was term 1, we actually went through the actual work whereby we said that we use those 3 methods to actually calculate what we actually used those 3 methods to actually calculate the GDP figures now. So just to quickly remind everyone, the GDP can be calculated in 3 different ways. These ways, they include your income method, your production, and also your expenditure method. Unfortunately, today, we will not be diving into the actual calculations. However, you can refer to the video that we did, because there is a recording on that, even for you grade 12s, in case you want to remind yourself as to how do you go about using the income method, the production method, and also the expenditure method. There is a video. You can just go back and search for it. It was in February. Then you would actually remind yourself. Then we need to actually move on now to the multiplier. Now, when we are dealing with the multiplier, there is a graph that we also need to know. Grade 12s, this one is for you. We also need to be in a position to actually do the graphical illustration. However, for grade 11 learners, the graphical illustration for this year for you is, well, you are not really required to be able to do that part. However, I will be taking you so that when you actually get to grade 12 and when you actually encounter a question that requires you to actually show the graphic illustration of the multiplier, you are in a position to actually do that. So now we have a Keynesian graph. That is what we are going to now explain. I will just try and maybe see if I can zoom in so that you can actually see. So now here, as we all know that whenever we are going to draw a graph, we need to label our x-axis. I'm hoping that it is zoomed. Otherwise, it is zoomed on my side. Hopefully, it shows on your side too. So yes, as I was saying, that you have your x-axis, you have your expenditure, and then you have your income side. Well, your income axis. Now you need to label that. You have your expenditure and you have your income. Let me just try and yes, there you go. So as I was saying, label your x-axis when you are doing your graphs. So as you can see that we have expenditure, which is denoted also as E. We have income, which is denoted as Y. So when I'm referring to E and Y, please just keep up as to what I'm actually referring to. So now what we have this line. We have this dotted line now. That line is referred to as the Keynesian line, as this is a Keynesian graph. So this dotted line here, it is known as the 45-degree or the Keynesian line. Now, as I've mentioned, that when you are dealing with graphs, you need to label and make sure that your labels, they are correct. Now we label this as E, which is the expenditure. It is equal to the income. That is what that E is equal to Y means. It's a label for that dotted line. Then here you have your consumption function. So this is the expenditure side. It says here that this part from 0 to 10, it is your autonomous expenditure. Now someone else might be asking themselves, what is an autonomous spending now? Now, an autonomous spending, it is the spending that, or expenditure, it is that spending that we have to do regardless if we received income or not. You know that you have to eat, so therefore you need to buy food. Maybe you are the breadwinner. Whether you have income or you don't have income, but you need to eat and your household, they need to eat. You need to pay for water and electricity. Those are just things that are non-negotiable. So when we're talking about the autonomous expenditure now, that is what we're actually referring to. And then there is your consumption function. Then there it says that E, which is the expenditure now. The expenditure in this line, it is exactly 210, which is that one, plus 0.81. That 0.8y, it is your marginal propensity to consume. So remember the spending now, it is businesses who are doing it and also the households. So now businesses are spending, let's say we're working with millions, 10 million, and households, they are probably spending 80% of their income. So that is the labeling of that first consumption function. Then here it is your equilibrium point, where you see that E1, first equilibrium point. Then you have the upper part of the expenditure. It says that expenditure increases due to the injection of 20 million. So now there is that 20 million that they are talking about. So we need to say now 10, which is that autonomous spending, plus the 20, it gives us the 30, which is now the new total income or the new total expenditure that is happening. So now this is the second consumption function, and then you also need to label it. As you can see there, it is E1, because there is another equilibrium point. E1 is equal to 10, which is the initial spending that took place, and then household, they still spending 0.8 of their incomes, and the new 20 billion that was injected into the circular flow. So number one, what I mentioned is that Y is equal to E. It is called the expenditure. It is called the line of equilibrium. Now, E is known as, which is this E now. This E1 and that E2, they are known to be the equilibrium points. Then this E, it means that businesses are spending, or they have injected 10 million into the economy or into the circular flow, and households, they plan to spend or consume 80% of their income. So this is firms spending 10 million, and then 80% households spending their income, which is this 80%, it is known as the MPC, which is the marginal propensity to consume. Then we move on. Now we have a formula that we use when we are calculating the multiplier. Now the graph is referred to as the Keynesian graph. So hence now we say K is equal to, so the formula is K is equal to, let me choose, so there is the formula. K is equal to 1 divided by 1 minus MPC. Then we simply substitute now. So you have your K is equal to 1 divided by 1 minus 0.8, which is that 80% of the money that is being consumed or spent. Now K, then we simplify that. K is equal to now 1 divided by 0.2. Then K is equal to 5. Then the money that the businesses are spending is how much? It is 10 million. Then you say your 10 times 5. It gives us a total new income now. So this is the spending that is done by the businesses, which is the injection into the circular flow. This is the multiplier. If the MPC is 0.8, then when you multiply the spending by the multiplier, you get your total income now, which is the national income, which is 50 million. And there's an alternative for the learners whom are doing economics and maths. So here, this is the alternative method where we say E, or consumption, is equal to 10 plus 0.8y. Then we say y, which is the income, it is equal to 10 plus 0.8y. Then we need now to group the like terms, and we know that when we are grouping the like terms to one side, the sign will change. So we're going to take this 0.8 and transfer it to this other side. Then we have that 1y minus, now the sign is changing, minus 0.8y. Then the 10 is left on that side. So now we want to have a y, so we would say 0.2y divided by 0.2. What we did on this side, we also need to do on the other side. Then we would also say 10 divided by 0.2. It gives us 50. So those are the two methods you could go about calculating now the actual income that would result if ever the marginal propensity of 0.8 was being applied. Hopefully you understand those, and for our economics and people who do maths lit, this formula, preferable for everyone in fact, this formula works best, and I always remember it. You will just choose whichever you feel is easy for you, and you can also remember when you are under pressure, because in most cases when we are answering these questions in an exam, we are under a lot of pressure. So whichever method works for you, please employ that method. Sorry about that. Oopsie. Let me just, yes, this is what I wanted. Sorry about that. Okay, cool. We were, yeah. So here, 20 billion now is being invested, well, 20 million is being invested into the economy, and the marginal propensity to consume is 0.8. As I've already explained the whole graph, now let's move on to actually answering these questions. So the assumption now is that we are working with million rands. So this is 20 million, this is 60 million, this is 50 million that you see. That's the assumption that we are working with. Now the first question, well, yes, it says that name the value of the autonomous consumption. Now, what is the value of the autonomous consumption from this graph that you see? The second one, identify the value of the MPC. So also from this graph, what is the value of the MPC? Number 3, what is the value of the total injections now? Total injection, money that is injected into the economy, their total. So when I say total, then that means something is added, just a hint or a clue. Then number 4, we need to calculate the value of the multiplier. We will actually get to use one of those formulas so that we can actually calculate the value of the multiplier. And then the last part, it says, calculate the effect of the injection on the national income now. So I'll give you just a few minutes, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, so that you can try and actually work out those, and then I will reveal the answers. Okay, I hope that we've managed to maybe answer all of them, or if not, don't worry, we'll actually go through it together. So, as the first question was saying, that you need to name the value of the autonomous expenditure. You need to look at your graph now for this particular one. So there is your value of your autonomous consumption. So number 1 is equal to 20 what? 20 million, because we said that the assumption is we are working with millions. Identify the value of the MPC. Again, you would be looking at this consumption function, and then there is the value of the MPC. Then the third question is saying, what is the value now of the total injections into the economy? So now the first one, or the initial money that was spent was 20, and then it went up to 60. So what's the difference between 60 and 20? There it is. What is the value of the total injection into the economy? So 40 plus 20 is equal to 60 now, which is the total injection into the economy. So initially 20 was spent, plus 40, it gave us 60. Yes. Then it needs us now to actually do the calculation, calculate the value of the multiplier. So our MPC would be 0.6. Now let's actually reveal how we're supposed to calculate that. Boom. Okay, cool. So now the MPC is 0.6. Remember, whenever you are subtracting your MPC, well, when you are adding your MPC and your MPS, it needs to give you a 1. So now that our MPC was 0.6, what is it that we need to add so that we can actually get to a 1? It's a 0.4. So now the formula says 1, let me just try to the actual calculate. So the formula, it says K is equal to 1 divided by 1 minus MPC. So now we substitute the MPC 1 minus 0.6. We are left with 0. So K. So now we are left with 0. Just in case people are wondering now, but how did we get to that that 1 divided by 4? So now the multiplier is 0.2. So this is how you calculate. So we were given MPC. Then I also just want to calculate using the MPS now, because we also need to be able to use. So this formula was using MPC, which was 0.6. And on this other side, I will use MPS, which is 0.4. Now the formula for MPS, it says K again is equal to 1 over MPS. This is the formula. Just showing you grade 12. This is a revision for you. Then you simply substitute now. 0.4 is MPS is 0.4. Then you get your 2.5, which is your multiplier. Now I always say to my grade 12s to make sure that you did the correct, or you used the correct method, or your calculations are correct. You need to make sure that when you use your MPC, the value that you get of the multiplier, it is also equal to the value that you get when you've used your MPS. So there is number 4, which is the multiplier is equal to 2.5. Yeah. Then the last question now, it needed us to take the value of the multiplier and then times, as you can see, 2.5, which is the value of the multiplier, times by the total spending now, or total injection into the economy, so that we can get how much of the national income is, which is the effect now, the overall effect of that 60 million. Now we see that that multiplier times that 60 million, which was 60 million, which was the injection or the expenditure, it is equal to 150 million. So those are the answers. You can just take them down, or just take a screen grab, or always come back to the video. Now let's move on. In a two-sector model, the equilibrium, now what is it that we need to know or be aware of, or always remember? In a two-sector model, the followings are the assumptions that are made. Obviously, there is no government intervention, no government. It is just your household and your businesses only. Obviously, it would now be a closed economy, because there is no foreign sector. There is no even our government now. There are no corporate savings, meaning that businesses, they spend all their money. They're not saving part of their money. Now, according to Keynes, the equilibrium, it exists when the aggregate demand is exactly equal to the aggregate supply. Now, Keynes also assumes that all the income is spent, and therefore income and expenditure, they are directly proportional. Just a summary now of what we've actually dealt with today. Expenditure, we need to remember that expenditure is never zero, because as much as your salary might be too little, however, you still need to do spending, because you have your basic needs that you need to take care of. You need to have food, whether you have too much money or you have too little money. So that's why we say that the expenditure, it is never zero, which is also known as the autonomous consumption. There is always something that you need to spend on. This is the spending that is not dependent now on income. As I've said, that even if your income is too small, you still need to spend. When calculating the multiplier, we look at the money that has been spent and not which has been saved. The multiplier is derived from the marginal propensity to consume, which is your MPC. Now, the size of the multiplier depends on the proportion of any increase in the income that is being spent. Now, I always say to my grade 12s that the relationship between the multiplier and the MPC is that if the MPC is larger, then definitely the value of the multiplier will also be bigger. If the MPC is small, then the multiplier or the value of the multiplier will also be small. So that's the relationship. It's a positive relationship. If MPC is big, then the value of the multiplier at the end, after you've done your calculation, it will also be big. If the MPC is small, now a bigger MPC would be 0.9 and a smaller MPC would be 0.1. Now, it is the money that stays within the economy. Remember, it needs to change hands within the borders of our country and not move to other countries. Now, there is an activity 1 that we need to complete. We'll do it together. So it says that complete the activity number 1. It says if MPC is equal to 1, then what is the MPS? So you just say 1 minus the other one, then that would be your answer. So then MPS there would be 0.9. If MPS now is 0.5, then what is MPC? Again, 1 minus 0.5 is equal to 0.5. Then if MPC, now you need to be extra careful, grade 11s and 12. Here they were asking if MPC is 0.1, what is MPS? And then here they were asking if MPS is 0.5, then what is MPC? So you just need to pay attention as to what the question is actually asking you. Then if the MPC is 0.5, then what is MPS? Then the fourth question, if MPS is 0.65, then what is MPC? Let me just reveal the answers so that you may be able to take them down. Just take a picture or just scribble, and then when you get home or at a later stage, you are able to just compare your answers with my answers. Then the last activity, which is activity 2, it says we need now to find the value of the multiplier. So they've given us now for 2.1, they've given us MPC. MPC is 0.9, and the second one, the MPC is 0.6. And then the last question, which is 2.3, they have given us MPS now. So I was saying now you need to pay attention so that you know which formula. So obviously now for 2.3, you are going to use the formula for MPS. So I'll just reveal the answers so that I can be able to just wrap up, as time is not by our side. Then you can just take a screen grab of the answers, and then when you get home or at a later stage when you are studying, you can just redo these activities. So the important part here is your formula. So if you are given MPS, if you are given MPC, you use that formula. If you are given MPS, you use this formula. So that is how to master your multiplier section. So now just to recap, the macroeconomic multiplier is about consumer spending and how this injection generates more money into the economy. And the model was developed by John Maynard Keynes, hence it is now called the Keynesian multiplier. And with that said, grade 11s and grade 12s, do the right thing. You need to watch, share the telematics videos so that the information can multiply, just as today's lesson was a multiplier. So you need to follow if you're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and also send your questions and queries on that WhatsApp line so that education can just multiply. Thank you very much, grade 11s and grade 12s. I hope that you enjoyed today's session and keep well. Thank you.